Good morning. It's the Cottage Country Insider Podcast. And today I have a very good friend of mine for our guest. His name's John Byrne. He's an insurance broker with Billyard Insurance. John, when did you move up here, actually? I was thinking that just before I turned the recording on. 6 years ago now?
The 2016. So what is
Oh,
that? 8?
math is in my thing. 7 years.
Yeah.
So John and Teresa and their two kids moved up here from Toronto, and I always kind of when I'm talking about people and they're saying, are people moving up here to do their work rather in Toronto, coming up to Parry Sound? These guys are my poster children for that because that's
Well,
exactly what they did.
so yeah, the interesting thing, right, is that you were my realtor before you were my realtor because we
Yes, I
bought an
was.
island property and you were representing the vendor. I didn't have like real estate agent, and my friend Ken introduced me to you.
Yeah.
And you brokered it for both of us basically. And then, like you said, are people moving up here? It's like we got to the point, my wife and I, where it's like, I'm sick of commuting an hour and 45 minutes one way to work, paying people to raise my kids and grinding. There must be a better way. And so when we left Toronto, we came here, I engaged you, you found us our dream home, our happy place, and we're very happy here. And it was the right move. And I wish I had done it 25 years sooner, perhaps. But that's hindsight's 2020.
But you've got a great spot, like it's like being out in the country, right in town. You have an acre and a half of property. You got a big wetland in the back. You got wildlife, and it's right in Parry Sound. It's amazing.
3 acres.
Is it 3 acres?
It's 3 acres.
Ah, okay. So maybe two 1.5 acre lots. Maybe that's what it is.
That's it. They're
Okay.
conjoined from that funny faux pas that happened in 1970 something.
Yeah, yeah. But it's amazing what you can get up here, and considering. And I saw pictures of your house in Toronto, and you lived in the High Park area. Like just complete opposite coming up here.
Oh yeah, postage stamp to all the space I'll ever need.
Yeah, well, you know what? We're not going to be able to use postage stamp as a description for properties anymore because young kids are going to go, "What's that?
True.
What the hell's a postage stamp?" I think
Yeah.
my grandfather used to collect those or something. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how things are changing. So what are you seeing as far as just an overview of things? What's been happening with the insurance industry over the last say the last 3 years through COVID?
Oh, great question. So, for me, one of the challenges is that I like to hang out with people. I like to be able to touch and feel the experience and whatnot. And COVID, fast tracked the idea of talking to a person in person. It made it almost impossible, right? And so, but that's really helped us in a lot of ways because there was a lot of reasons that maybe you didn't need to be in person anymore. And so we've gotten 25 years of technological advances in 3 in order to be able to work remotely, never need to be in the office, have access to all our technologies working vibrantly and robustly without failure. So that's been super cool. In terms of what it means to customers, I'm sure you would recognize that when just from the selling of homes and when the prices went crazy, the same thing is happening from rebuilding costs. When you can't get a builder, and so it's causing insurance companies to reach out to their broker partners and whatnot and say, look, we know we're underinsured, right? Like our portfolio with our customers, the cost of per square foot has easily moved from somewhere around 240 for a standard per square foot standard built home to 350 easy. As you would have seen, like you're probably working with sales opportunities where there's new builds and stuff, and the cost of building is insane. Like
Yeah, it certainly has been. So if I'm a homeowner, which I am, one of the things I do every year, usually around Christmas, early New Year's, I review all my insurance policies, look at what I've got. Like, is that something that people should be doing, or should they be doing their own, or should be doing it with their broker?
The Yeah, absolutely. You're always at the end of the day, as the owner of the policy and the home, to be responsible, make sure that it's insured correctly. But you would know from speaking to me, I'm a pretty aggressive advocate of the broker channel as opposed to the direct channel. And if you have a talented, thoughtful broker, they're ahead of this for you, right? They're getting your renewal. They're looking at it. They know what's underpinning as the rebuild value, and they know if you're underinsured, and they're probably asking you or telling you it's time to reevaluate that.
Yeah, well, there's so many things that people have with their insurance policies, especially here in cottage country. You don't only have your house or your cottage, but you've got your ATVs,
All your
you've got
fun
your
stuff, right?
boats, all the
Yeah,
fun stuff. Yeah,
all the fun stuff. And
yeah.
that is one of my favorite things about being in Cottage. The boating thing, being so close to Georgian Bay and stuff, and like it's the best.
Yeah, well, and you have to make sure those are insured, because I tell you, if you run a boat and you've got a decent sized boat and you run it up on a rock, I had a friend of mine that did that a couple of years ago. Huge, huge, huge cost to repair these things.
Oh, and so you could elaborate on this for sure. You would know, since living here all this time, the water table in Georgian Bay is exposing rocks and what do you call it? What are those things? Like a ledge of or a
Sure,
shell, a
sure,
shoal.
sure.
They're appearing in ways, and they don't mark them anymore because that creates liability issues, and it takes a while for the ministry to upgrade the maps on your GPS. So, those assets that maybe historically you'll hear on Facebook, people chatting and saying things like, "Oh, it's not an obligation to have insurance. You don't even need it." Well, you will be guaranteed to hit something in Georgian Bay.
Oh, up here for
Guaranteed.
boating, you're an idiot if you don't have insurance. You don't only have insurance for that, but you have the liability insurance. And there was one extremely well covered one here about 5 years ago, where a celebrity on Lake Joan, there was a boating
Ah,
accident, people
yeah,
died. So
I
you
know
have
the
to have
one.
that liability as well. You know the one. I'm not going to say the name, but yeah, like it's just you have to make sure that you have adequate insurance for these types of things.
100%. Yeah, because you don't want to be like that's life altering issues, right?
Oh
Like
yeah.
it'll become your all day, every day. And yeah, you got a family to raise, a job to do, and things like that. But that will become everything in your life.
So, what different types of insurance policies are available to homeowners beyond, the replacement, in a catastrophic event and liability? What else do you see that are, kind of included in these policies?
Um, well, home insurance or property insurance, the stuff that I think is the talk of today, is like there are as many different permutations of a home policy as you could possibly imagine, right? So it starts from maybe what you're covered for. So the perils you're insured against, which could be an all perils policy, which is basically defined by what's excluded. If it's not excluded, it's covered. An example might be if you had like a very expensive carpet, worth $25,000, and you spilled something on it. Under a basic policy, not protected, but because it's not excluded under an all perils, now you could seek coverage under that policy. Then there's uh, actual cash value versus guaranteed replacement cost, which is once it's agreed that you're insured to value, guaranteed replacement cost means even if it costs more than that at the time of the loss, you would be protected. Whereas an actual cash value policy is that, the depreciation of the asset over time and what it would cost at market to replace that thing, and no protection for inflationary indexes and things like that.
Which you should have when inflation's now running 5.2 or 5.3%. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And insurance companies are good at it. Like they apply a factor on your renewal every year of X percent. But, that's also a reason to keep an eye on it, because sometimes it's arbitrary, right? And it doesn't always go up, right? So it can stay static. And so artificially over time, a home can inflate. And that's why you'll find customers every few years, their rates have gone up and they're like up and up and up and up. I haven't made a claim. I don't understand. Then they'll go seek a quote and it's less. And largely it's because the rebuild value, using an accurate calculator in today's market, has a rebuild value probably less than what you're currently insured for. And that doesn't mean you chase the lower rebuild value, just make sure that it's accurate.
Yeah. What about, we got a lot of properties up here, and you're talking about Georgian Bay, that are water access, and there's obviously no fire protection because there's no fireboat going around if there's a fire. How do you insure those types of properties?
Well, for the same kind of concept as that, there's as many different insurance policies and products and permutations. Every insurance company has a secret sauce, if you will. I want to kind of be in this market, or I don't want to be in this market. And there's specialty markets that understand that type of risk. And so they know how to underwrite them and evaluate them to make sure thing. And there's also then the type of coverage you can get for that. You can be offered only the basic of coverages, because they know if it catches fire, it's a total loss, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, like nobody's going to get there within the right time frame in order to put it out. And then of course, the cost of insuring those locations is generally higher because the risk is higher. And then you have the other concept is that many of those homes, and you would have seen them, they're very robust and beautiful locations, like with very custom builds, and would be, and they are always, in my opinion, better positioned with organizations that specialize in high valued, right? So at that particular point, it's always best to seek like the best in class organization. It's like, we want that high valued home. It's the business we're in, because they know how to evaluate it, price it, and protect you. And their claim service, right, is a bit white glove, which those customers
Expect.
if that's what they want.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't want that insured. And this is I'm not trying to put them down. Because I know lots of people that work in that thing, but those type of items should not be insured in a direct to consumer channel, right? You need a broker that has access to products and services that are specialized, diverse, and you would have options, as opposed
Things
to
things
like
go sideways. Like, if you've got mortgage, one of the questions we find a lot of people don't know, if you're buying a house or a cottage, you have to have, if you're mortgaging it, you have to have insurance, adequate insurance to cover at least the cost of the mortgage. And you have to give a binder letter from the insurer to your lawyer to give to the finance people, or to whoever's underwriting the mortgage, with proof of that. It's like, and we tell people that you need to have it. Oh, we don't want insurance. It's like, yeah, it's not an option. You need to have it. You're not going to get the mortgage if you don't.
Right. And it's like and that happens also. They'll get notified if the policy gets canceled, even for some reason, right? Because that's the agreement that the insurer makes to that lien holder. It's like, we need to be notified if anything happens to this contract. And so it's not uncommon when you move a customer to another provider and that other policy gets canceled, they get the notification that it's canceled before they get the notification that it's reinsured, and they say, "Hey, wait a second, we want our money." You
Yeah.
know,
Well, it's, if there's a catastrophic, you have to make sure that there's enough to at least call the mortgage, because if not, then you could be personally liable for any shortcomings too. So you've got to be careful with this stuff. What kind of things are affected? Like, and we have cottages here, not the water access ones. We always say, if you're within about 8 kilometers of a fire department, that you get a little bit of a deal on your insurance. We're always looking at Google Maps, fire department, cottage at 6.4. You
yeah.
should be fine. Is that true? Because that's the way I've always
Well,
understood it.
fire protection is like a key underpinning of pricing for sure. You would be familiar with, let's say, Highway 518.
Yep.
That's just out here, and
Going out to
so
Oroville.
yeah, and so some of the fire departments in that are reviewing a new thing. Well, not new for them, let's say, called shuttle tanker service. So because there's no hydrants out there, they were only ever at one point considered at best semi-protected, if you will, because, as you described, fire station was within 8 clicks. Okay, and once you're outside of 8 clicks, then you're fully not protected because there's no hydrant and there's no fire department within that small window of time. Now, with shuttle tanker service, which is the ability to deliver X number of liters of water in X number of minutes, right? And they get tested and certified. Now it's like having a hydrant. So the pricing level falls in between. And a lot of our McDougall friends, if you're listening, the fire department out by Lake Manitowoc fire station, I can't remember exactly, is shuttle tanker service accredited. So if you're not getting, if you want to seek an opportunity to have lower premiums, you may already be benefiting from it. But if you're not, you're probably paying more than you should.
Like we and that's a good point, because we've got like one municipality in this area, the archipelago, that has no fire protection at all. It is an organized municipality, but I don't know how many municipalities in Canada don't offer that. So it can be surprisingly more expensive.
Yes. Oh,
getting
yeah.
insurance if you're on Blackstone Lake or something like that.
I was quoting a quote, and the reason I had 518 on my mind is I was working with a customer yesterday, and the insurance premiums varied anywhere from 2,000 to 5,500, depending on the insurance company, and the rebuild value on the home was like modest, I would say, like at 450,000, right? But it's because, once again, it's a total loss. Like, no one's going to get to it in time if it catches in fire. And so the insurance company is not going to be able to mitigate their risk in any way. And that's why you're paying so significantly more.
So through COVID, has it been, I'm thinking of, we've had some friends that have had catastrophic losses in the last 6 months or to a year. Are things taking longer to do? Or things? Yeah, it happens. And it's always, you can rebuild a house, you can't replace a life. So thankfully, there's been no loss of, except for maybe the odd fur baby type life. There's been no loss of human lives. But is it easy to get rebuilds done now? Just considering the contractors have been extremely busy through the last 3 years, is it more challenging?
Yes. Not just because the contractors are hard to get at, but their supply chains for lumber and materials and stuff are also largely impacted, right? So even if you had a builder or a contractor that was ready to go, everybody's fighting over for the same limited resources to get their jobs done. So I know contractors that are working on custom builds that are like their end dates are 5 years out.
Wow.
because some of the things that they need, and even access to employees, the talented workers and people that want to show up to work has also been a challenge through COVID. Um, and I think some of it's psychological. They don't like, people are afraid to be out in the world. Some of it is if you're getting like some form of economic input into your life, right? Because you can't find work. And what was the name of the support over CERB?
Sir, yeah.
It made access to some employees extremely difficult, right? And that's a learning curve. Like, we're all trying to figure out how to fix that.
Well, we had, and I was talking to you before we went on air here, we had one just outside of Parry Sound, and it was a year and a half turnaround on it. And part of the problem was they couldn't get accommodations for local, for the people coming here. So they had to commute every day from the Aurelia area up here, hours drive. And so, 2 hours of every day were tied up with them just commuting. And
Right.
then they had problems getting windows, had problems getting siding, had problems getting everything. And it wasn't quite a year and a half. I think it was 16 months in the end from the time the fire happened and the claim was done till the rebuild was complete.
Yeah. And we're also talking about the fact that, I don't, if this camera on my laptop can show it, I have no flooring in this basement. And
Yeah.
the perimeter walls are cut like 2.5 feet up the wall, and the insulation has been removed, the baseboards, all the moldings and things like that, because I had a flood in July. So, but it's the length of time is like, this is no fault on the insurance company. They've done a fine job staying communicated with me. The organization that's going to be doing the work has also done a fine job of staying communicated. The reality is that I wanted to work, and this speaks to insurance. This is if you're an insurance customer and you have a claim, always speak to your insurance company about who their preferred shop network is. Because rather than, you might want to take the money and work with your own contractor or try to find a contractor, but you'll have no recourse after that's done if the work isn't top notch, right? Or to your satisfaction. Whereas when you're working with the preferred shop of that insurance company, it's like, for as long as I own this house, I can call, right, faults into whatever work was done if it starts to not stand up. Whereas you won't have that if you're not working. So I really wanted to work with them, and so I've had to wait because they're not local. Just the experience that your friends are having, and so once the snow started, they were like, "This is a non-starter. We'll see you in April." And I'm like, "Okay," But I've been living
Well,
without
but,
floors.
But what happened with your place was such a little thing. It's not like
Oh,
somebody let the water, and you went, I don't know, to town. Somebody run the bathtub. It was the leak. From what I think Teresa told me, with your water coming into the house, wasn't it?
the supply line into the washing machine. So it was just a load of laundry. It was running. It came disconnected, and it ran warm water into the basement for about 8 hours. And so the cost to get it back, including the loss of property, is mind-blowing. Like, it's significantly more than I anticipated. But I have the right coverage. I'm protected well, and so it's all going to get looked after. But right, don't underestimate the cost of repairing a finished basement that has water damage, for
Nope.
sure.
It's not
Right.
20 grand, I'll tell you that. And one of the things we tell people in old cottages, for example, because I've seen it happen twice, where there's been a power outage and the water goes off for a couple of days. It freezes, power comes on,
1,000%.
pumps the lake into the cottage. So one of the things where I say to people, just best practices is shut the water off before you leave.
And
Shut the
drain the
pump off,
system.
shut the water. Oh, and drain the system if it's possible. But worst case scenario, You just try to mitigate your damage. We always tell people, if you're going to have a power outage, and if you live out in the woods somewhere out on the lake, put a whole house generator. It's well worth the investment.
Yeah, 1,000%.
Yeah.
And if you're and shutting the supply line, absolutely. If you're going to be gone, and that's another thing customers should know. There is actually a warranty in most residential policies that if you're going to be away from it during the heating season for more than 4 days, you have obligations to fulfill. Right.
So if I've got a winterized cottage and I'm up like 2 weeks at a time, so I shouldn't be having somebody coming and checking the cottage?
Or you do the things that you talked about. You shut off the
Okay.
system, right? Because the thing is that if there is a rupture, right, and the supply line is on and it's going to continue to pump water, you go from a minor loss to something catastrophic, right? And so during the heating system, that's an important understanding. Go to your policy wording and look up what those warranties are, what the expectation is. Maybe having somebody come to look at it daily. Or it could be shutting and draining the system. But most policies have that provision.
What about doing things like, one of the things I've had in my last couple of houses that I've owned is having electronic, like an internet-based thermostat in my house. And we have an Ecobee we had in the house that when we lived over in your area, and then our new house, we have it as well. And a good story is we were gone at a friend's place about 5 years ago for New Year's Eve. And my Ecobee emailed me in the morning, January 1st, 2018 or whatever. And it's like, Happy New Year. Your house is 12 degrees. And it's like, oh, crap. Because the furnace went during the night.
Right.
But,
Wow.
it's one of those things. And I always share that with people. We like the Ecobee just because it's Canadian company and they just work. I know people have had off and on experiences with the Nest. But that's something that you can do easily. You put cameras in our Ecobee. We've got something else that measures humidity of the house, measures carbon dioxide in the house. So being a geek, I can monitor this stuff. We're in Europe last week. I turned my thermostat down every day, look at it, make sure everything's fine. One of the kids drop by every day. Yeah. So there was a problem, and then at least I could go to my insurance and say, this is what I did. So I just shut it down and just forgot about it for a month.
Well, I think you would agree with this. The point that raises, Jim, is you're traveling, right? And why are you traveling? It's like, because you deserve it and you've earned the right to do it. And you should have absolutely nothing on your mind except for having the best time ever, right? When you're at the Rijksmuseum in Holland, right? You want to be looking at the night watch, not thinking about anything else. And so if you have those risk mitigation tools in place, right, that's just one less thing on your mind. And the interesting thing about them is one of the most valuable new concepts is a water sensor that can now be connected to those systems, right? So if there's somewhere within that system, it's losing pressure, it knows there's an issue, right? There's a leak or something like that, or that there's a rupture. The temperature thing, 100% very valuable, because if you're dropping below freezing, right, where you normally wouldn't be, let's say, because the furnace is on, moderating it or something like that, and you've got water in those pipes, if they freeze, they will rupture. And because that water expands in that system and it's not meant to manage that expansion, and it melts, supply lines on, water for days, huge problem. And you can say all you want that it's covered, but no one wants to deal with the claim. I'm working on July, August, September, October, November, December, January, February, all of March. I'm 9 months in and I have no basement floors. As I'm speaking to you right now, my feet are freezing.
You gotta wear what I do. I just wear moccasins all winter because as I get older, my feet just get colder and colder. But I think for people, one of the most absolutely most traumatic experiences, obviously losing a loved one. The second one is having stuff like you're talking about,
Your
house
life
having
being
a
disrupted.
fire. Oh, it's unbelievable stressful. You want to avoid this stuff if possible, and using a little bit of common sense and the technology and things like that goes a long way from avoiding these things.
Yeah, the things. This is an interesting point because you mentioned something earlier about not needing insurance, like belief systems that people carry about what they need and don't need. And um, I think of a couple of instances where, um, although in some instances, the fires that we've had in Parry Sound, some people had insurance, but in some instances, let's say tenants of those locations, they didn't have insurance. And all of a sudden, their life has moved to a Facebook page saying, "Go fund me because I lost everything." And it's like, it'll work and it has worked, but it's a stress you want to avoid. And for what would be, you know, for a basic tenants package, $30 or $40 a month, uh, that's the right place to spend your money as opposed to somewhere else and trying to retrofit your life via a GoFundMe.
Yeah. Oh God. Yeah. Absolutely. We tell tenants all the time. The policy is going to cost you like a couple $100 a year. Just do it. If there's an issue somewhere, at least you've got something to protect you.
Yeah. And
What
for
about
those, go ahead.
what about insurance for, like, we've got, I'll just get an example. We had somebody on last week talk about short-term rentals.
Hmm.
If you've got a cottage in a municipality that allows short-term rentals in the Parry Sound area or Muskoka or wherever, what type of insurance policies should cottage owners be looking at?
A great thing, and I didn't respond. I didn't include this in what I was talking about. That there's clearly been a development since uh, COVIDian times, and also the Airbnb concept, right? Uh, that a lot of policies to now include an acceptable amount of Airbnb or short-term rental. Sometimes it's up to 30 or 60 days in any 1 year window. And so as long as you're not exceeding those values, you don't need to make any changes, but you should go to your wording to make sure that it's included. If you're more of an investor type of thing and it's like a full-time Airbnb type tool, though standard homeowners or seasonal doesn't get there because it's not acknowledging that risk as a full-time use as that property. But there's lots of products that a broker has access to, right? Again, I'm pumping the broker channel as opposed to the direct markets because they generally don't. They're more of a, what would you say, uh, a simple solution for, I got like 2 cars, 1 house, that's it, 1 mortgage, and it's all very basic stuff. Oh, and a good driving record, right? It's once you start leaving that thing, because I'm adding a vacation property or I'm adding a jet ski or I'm adding a boat, an ATV, then they get less effective at doing that. And that's why you want a broker, because he has
Well,
options for all of it.
you're preaching to the converted with that. We always recommend people use insurance brokers as opposed to using the bank or whatever. It's the same with mortgages. Like, don't deal direct with your bank on a
Oh yeah,
mortgage.
you would
Deal
have
with a
lots of
broker all the
experience with
time.
that. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Absolutely. It just gives you so many more options. And I'm not going to use any names of them or whatever, but sometimes it's a little too handy just to go into the bank and get I'll use the bank, pick on banks sometimes. Just get your insurance and all that comes out of your bank account, easy peasy, but it might not be giving you what you really need. So what misconceptions, because I tell you with insurance, there's tons of them out there. What kind of common misconceptions are there out there about insurance that consumers have?
Uh, the biggest one is that they make a
Yeah.
lot of money, because they really don't. And everybody watching right now is going, "Yeah, right." Let me explain. So generally when we watch like the news and they say new record earnings reported by insurance industry, like billions of dollars, what they often do in that explanation is they are lumping in every possible insurance type of business, like life, annuity, home, auto, travel, business, and things like that. And the ones that generally have a high rate of return for the underwriter is life and annuity and things like that, because their risk over time is much, much less than, what is for the stuff that I'm mostly dealing with, which is like home, auto, business type insurance. And so one company that, I follow because I know them and I worked for them at one point. For every dollar in, they have 92 cents of expenses when you consider employees, the buildings that they're renting, and investments in technology, paying claims, right? And so
a pretty thin margin.
And then
Yeah.
where historically their margins might have been higher, that they and even now that 8% they invest it, right? But what people may not understand is that an insurance company is expected to invest it in only, and this is regulated, like a AAA blue chip stock. Like it cannot be put into something that's speculative, because that regulator is protecting us from them getting careless and not having enough money to pay our claims, right? And so with the reduced ability to make money on that 8 cents, if you will, and the fact that they only get 8 cents from every dollar in, and that's performing well, actually. Like a 92% combined operating ratio is actually performing significantly well. Like there's been years, let's say between 2013 and 2018, it would have been, if you were getting a penny and a half or 2 cents of profit on every dollar, you were winning the game.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's incredible. Yeah.
And then the other one is, I'm sure you guys would have heard this term, like an acts of God are not covered or something like,
Yeah,
but
we hear that.
yeah, it's just kind of I don't know where the term came from, because like a falling tree is one of the most basic perils of all time. And I don't know what else you'd call it. Right? You could definitely link it to being an act of God of some kind, or a windstorm or lightning, or any of all very, very basic perils, and insured in almost even the rudimentary of contracts. So the concept, that term it's not well used and doesn't really describe what's covered or not covered.
There is one, I just thought of it. We had I'm not sure if you remember. I think you guys were living up here at the time, but about 5 years ago, we had a massive windstorm come in around the second weekend of July.
Oh yeah,
about 2018. We had a cottage for sale, and the cottages across the road lost all their trees.
Yeah.
Our cottage lost two, and the insurance companies, like around here, it must have cost them millions of dollars, because you had 130 pine and maple and oak trees down on some of these properties. You look at it, and it looked like literally a hurricane or tornado went through it. It was a microburst, some type of system that went and it kind of bounced along, running from the west to east southeast. And like those are things. That's a black swan event. That's probably going back to almost 50 years in my mind, with another storm like that.
Well, excellent talking point too, because for anybody watching, pick up your insurance policy, and I'm sure you're going to read that there's significant limitations to what's available in your product for trees and shrubs. Right? So most policies have that stuff specially limited. And it's reasonable to expect that it would all be covered, but you can imagine if insurance companies, in addition to the asset, right, that they've evaluated for the cost of rebuilding and so on, if they were insuring every single tree to value, it would be impossible to remain profitable.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, and this year I don't think they were even spending money replanting white pine trees. I think it was just a cleanup, like just a mess. They're in some of these properties for like 2 weeks with a
Mm-hmm.
crew of guys or people coming in with their saws, and you have to cut the trees down. You got to pile some of them for firewood. The other stuff gets either burnt or hauled off. Like it's just
You speaking of that storm has actually reminded me of something that's very interesting, and I wanted definitely to speak to you about, since you engaged me to say, hey, would you like to do this? And of course I said, the Jim Marshall Park cost, I'm there for sure. But everyone might remember the floods in 2013 in Toronto.
yes, remember
Okay.
that.
And so that caused such a significant, let's say, change of gears in the insurance industry, because the losses that people were having where the water was coming overland, okay, because the sewer systems and stuff just did not have the infrastructure to manage that amount of water. And now you had water entering your home because of like rising groundwater and like a river losing its banks and so on. Historically excluded, right?
Oh
Still
yeah,
excluded under a base policy. However, from that event, insurance companies have gone and said, okay, if because many of them paid the losses on good faith. Because when it happened in Calgary, the after they were told that there was no coverage, the media went bananas, and insurance companies said, "Okay, fine, we'll pay it, even though it's excluded. We'll cover it." And then they had to come up with it. Well, if we're going to pay these types of claims because we can't afford to manage the media backlash and you know contribute to the already existing belief system that insurance companies are monsters.
yeah,
It was like, we need to find a way to charge for it, rate for it correctly, and whatnot. And so, uh, like years of actuarial science and teams getting together and trying to figure out, okay, redefining locations, their flood tables, who we right? Who will we sell this insurance to, and how much will we charge for it? Um, Create the advent of like sort of like a linked sewer backup overland water, where you can't get overland water unless you have sewer backup. And if the two events like happen within a certain window of time, they're considered one event. But that's one of the most important things to be looking at today as a consumer of home insurance, is the availability of sewer backup and overland water, because the entire engine or system that rates insurance has changed from fire, that's what it used to be based on, to water. Water is the most common claim nowadays, and uh, certain companies have very, very prohibitive limits, right? Like the maximum they sell, let's say, is $25,000 or $50,000 of sewer backup. I can tell you in my house, although it wasn't a sewer backup, the damage has exceeded that value by a mile. So if it did happen because of an overland water or sewer backup event, and I had a product that was limited to 50,000, I would now be out of pocket.
yeah.
And
Wow.
that's a big deal. And some companies, right, because of where they have their rate tables, interesting story. You share DNA with this customer. When he bought a new house and moved, I had to change the insurance company that he was with, because the amount of sewer backup and overland water being offered by the company he was already with uh, wasn't never going to get there. And so the other company offered full policy limit sewer backup. So he has to pay more, right? His rates went up, but for not to the point where you wouldn't want to make that buying decision, right? You
Yeah,
need that peace of
yeah.
mind. You need that coverage. And if that is the most likely thing you're going to experience in terms of loss, you better have the best coverage you can get.
Oh yeah, because if that day ever happens, then you want to make sure that you're protected. And there's a lot. I know people that haven't had fire insurance; their house has burnt down over the years. It's just heartbreaking. But
That's heartbreaking. Like I can't even
it's
imagine.
nope. Well, the one that I remember was down where I used to live, and the whole community came together and helped them rebuild the house. It was amazing.
That's pretty
You know
cool.
how the community, yeah, it's stuff that happens up here. Everybody kind of came in. People donated materials, time, and all that. They got the house rebuilt,
We live
and
in the
but
best town on the planet,
damn
1000%.
right, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. That's the reason why you guys moved up here. So if somebody's looking for some advice on insurance, how can they get in touch with you, John?
With me, so I have my email address is john.byrne@thebig.ca, and I'm not sure, Jim, if you can add that to
I
underneath.
will add all the contact information for you. And this John Byrne, I'm just going to say that this guy was not the former lead singer of a very, very famous rock group who shares name with
Or the
have you ever,
cartoonist.
or the cartoonist? No, I think about the John Byrne of the Talking Heads being a music
Yes.
guy. So, yeah, I think that John's probably a little older than you, but John, thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been a really, really good talk. I will put all the contact information for John on the show notes. And you know what? It's snowing out. It is, I guess, you're looking
It's a
outside.
snow day. My kids are home.
Yeah, I know. It's almost April, but this is what it's. The weather's unpredictable here, so you know what? It is what it is. You just
Well,
do what you can do. So,
I really appreciate you giving me some airtime. Pretty
yeah,
cool.
no problem. Let's get together and have a dog date sometime. Have,
Yes, our dogs
our
are
dogs
brothers.
are our dogs are brothers. Yes, they are. So, anyways, thank you very much, John. We'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Hey, Jim, you have a super day.
Okay. Bye bye.